Good morning, everyone around the world, and welcome to today's webinar, Successful Fundraising in Today's Market. I'm Echo Hindoyang, founder and CEO of MSQ Ventures, a global advisory firm that have supported over 200 biotech companies across 22 countries. This session is part of our Bio Around the World series, an initiative we create to connect biotech leaders, investors, and innovators around the globe, and to foster open, practical conversation about building impactful companies. Today's topic couldn't be more timely. And with continued market uncertainty and evolving investors' expectations, biotech companies are facing real challenges, but also opportunities to raise capital, refine their story, and build a strong long-term partnership. We are honored to be joined by 4 incredible panelists today who bring deep experience from both sides of the table. And so I will introduce each of them. Katherine, she is a partner at Decheng Capital, one of the most respected biotech investors in both early and later stage companies. Marc, a CEO and executive director of Immutep, a seasoned biotech executive with hands-on experience in public markets and global capital raising. Xing, partner and Panacea Venture, who brings deep expertise in early-stage biotech investment across Asia and the US. Roland, Helfenstein, CFO of the Numab Therapeutics, a company that has raised substantial fundings in Europe's competitive biotech market. So thank you all of you joining me today. So we will begin with a panel discussion, and before that, I want to invite all of you to introduce yourself. Thank you. So we will start with Faith because you are close to me in New York.
Oh, thank you, Echo. It's nice to meet you, and thank you for your invitation. As you already mentioned, I'm a partner at Panacea. We have presence globally in Asia as well as in the US. I'm currently based in New York. I was trained as a physician, and happy to share with you more.
Thank you, Faye. Next, since Katherine, you are in California, we'll go around the global today.
Great. Thank you, Echo, for this opportunity. So I'm with Decheng Capital for almost 6 years now. So Decheng was founded in 2011, 2012 timeframe. So we're a venture capital firm focused on healthcare investments. We have about 5 venture funds and then 1 separate public fund on the US side. So AUM is about $2.5 billion. We also have RMB denominated funds. We have a ground team in Shanghai and headquartered in here, Menlo Park, California. And we also have a New York office where I'm usually based in.
Thank you, Katherine. I assume, Roland, you are in Europe now, so you're next.
Yes, thanks, Echo, for having me on this webinar. I'm the CFO of Numab Therapeutics. We're based in Switzerland, and I'm part of Numab now for the past 14 years.
Thank you, Roland. Marc, are you in Australia or Europe?
Right now in Europe, and pleasure to be here. Thank you, Echo. So my name is Marc, CEO of Immutep, and we are actually an Australian company with subsidiaries in Europe and also in the United States, so globally active, listed on the Australian Stock Exchange as well as on the NASDAQ.
Thank you. Thanks for all of you. And so let's start it. I think the probably most hard topic today is how current situation, what's going on around the world now, like will influence the biotech investment, the climate, and the company strategy. We will go with the Faith first.
Okay, so I think the issue that's on most investors' mind are the kind of the changes around FDA and NIH, right? So let's start with the FDA. We've seen so far 19% of their workforce cut. So that's signed. There are hundreds of scientists, reviewers, administrators who have played pivotal roles in drug approvals. Internally, understandably, their morale is very low You can feel it in the conversations, and it really matters, right? So now in our portfolio, we haven't seen significant regulatory delays yet, but we're concerned about the long-term implications, especially around the potential loss of institutional knowledge. Drug development, as all of us know, is a marathon. It takes on average 10 years, 1 billion. That hasn't changed to bring therapy to market. And during this 10 years, companies are in constant dialogue with the FDA, meeting minutes, reviewer feedback, regulatory guidance, and that's the compass that keeps programs on track. And what people may not realize is it takes about, on average, 7 years for a junior FDA reviewer to become somebody who can really make judgment calls especially on complex issues like surrogate endpoints, trial design for rare disease, or pediatric protocol, et cetera, et cetera. So that kind of nuanced understanding is built slowly over time and through exposure to hundreds of programs. And if we lose those experienced reviewers, we don't just slow down drug approvals. We risk creating inconsistency and uncertainty that can seriously sidetrack development programs, especially, and that's really the lifeline for biotech and also for pharma. NIH cuts are equally troubling. And roughly half of the scientists at NIH are immigrants, by the way. And that's the talent pipeline that has powered America biotech for decades. And one thing I just want to point out is a lot of the de-risking capital happened at CBER. And so, the talented scientists from UCSF or Harvard, they often seek NIH funding before they look for that initial Series A. So what happens if that funding from NIH is cut? So those are the long-term implications that we are worried about the most. And just finally, I think the irony is FDA is mostly funded by the industry through user fees. So biopharma is paying the bill, but they're the biggest loser at this stage. So I really hope that there's intense lobbying effort, negotiation happen, and that's our suspicion. The stakes are just too high for there not to be any negotiation. So we're really fingers crossed that'll happen.
Thank you, Fei. Wow. I think this kind of we are in a very serious situation, especially in the biotech. It's all about talent. It's about especially building this. It takes normally average 20 years to build a drug, and the cost $2 billion, and all the changes. It's kind of like shake the foundation of the biotech community. So, Marc, what's your view from your experience in Europe? What do you see the impact, and also your experience in Australia? What do you see the impact on that side?
I mean, first of all, really underpin all the comments from Fei, very important remarks here also in terms of the funding of the FDA. Of course, if you look at the relative importance of the United States in terms of the global markets, it's the biggest market, right? So it has an impact abroad. If you look at the uncertainty also for the pharmaceutical industry, not only for biotech, of course, this impacts potential investment decisions or decisions in terms of positioning in general. So uncertainty is certainly not welcomed by any market globally, and we see it practically dragging down the markets everywhere. However, it would be unfair to say that it is a difficult situation for the biopharmaceutical industry since November or January this year. The crisis is actually going on since 2022, I believe. We had the heyday during COVID, and we had seen back then already maybe some additional reasons why it's currently a bit more difficult than you saw in other historic crises. Because back then a number of different companies IPO'd and they were maybe not mature enough, let's say, or the story is not robust enough. So besides all the newer political impacts, which will certainly impact us moving forward as well, we have not been mentioning tariffs, for instance, and the whole discussion around that. It's also that the industry as such disappointed maybe a little bit here or there, to be self-critical. And this has been going on since a long period of time. And also in the prior US administration, there was a discussion around the Biosecure Act. So also the Chinese-US angle have been affected in different ways. So the uncertainty is now maybe at a new scale. That's never good. We as a company position ourselves globally. We have been doing that in the past. That's not a new thing. We, for instance, run a phase 3 trial in first-line non-small cell lung cancer. That's obviously a global endeavor in more than 25 countries. So while the US FDA feedback is, of course, very important, we do see globally relatively normal regulatory interactions. And with the FDA, I believe also to Faye's point, the full impact is not yet known, and we are going to see what's going to happen during the course of this year and later on. So for us currently, uncertainty, certainly not good, but on a global regulatory sphere, things are within the normal range, I would say.
Thank you for that sharing. I think now is all connected as global is one country, and also two countries can be impacted on the global. And so what do you see, Roland, from your end?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Faye said, right? We also with the departure of the FDA staff. I mean, the question is the turnaround times, and it will be interesting to see whether that creates a change. Maybe, you know, like that. Well, as Marc said, right, the US remained the most important market also for the approval of clinical trials. But if you have a lack of exchange with the regulatory representatives, the question is whether maybe more clinical trials will be first done in Europe. I don't know. We will see that because the regulatory interaction is so important. And I think as a company also that is in development stage, question is also if such delays would really materialize, if that has an impact on fundraising, because, you know, like you need more time, that has an impact on burn rate. You need to manage that burn rate accordingly. So we'll see where this all balances out in the future.
That's very interesting. You said that like a regulatory change may bring more clinical trial to Europe. I remember a few years ago when we talked about China and the US, and actually the European company get more funding and from Chinese investors, but also locally. And in the past, is more European come to US for funding or go to IPO here. So US is push the company to get out of here.
It is, and I think it's important also. I mean, what we experienced, of course, you know, if you work together with US-based investors, there is a certain expectation, or it's important that you do clinical trials in the US, what I can understand because it's a familiar regulatory environment. But given now the current situation, we will see whether this holds up or whether there will be any change. Okay,
let's keep this point later. I wanted to understand if European government take advantage of that. First, let's Katherine share her view from the investor. How is any positive side?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's more negative these days. I totally echo what the other panelists say. I think from a public markets perspective, if you look at XBI, it's down almost 30% since the election. So that was pretty much a 50-week high at that moment in November of last year. And obviously, there's a lot of macro. A lot of it is macro, including the recent tariff wars that brought down the whole market. But there's a lot of sector specific as well, right? So we're high beta, so we're going to come down more than the major indexes anyways. But on the regulatory side, I think all these leadership, new appointments, new resignations, all these layoffs, has really been casting a lot of doubts and uncertainty onto our sector. And I think from a public markets perspective, people are paying a lot higher discount rate to our sector, our industry, and also from a long-term perspective, there's very serious doubt on it, whether the long-term innovation is going to be hurt, right? With all these cutting in the funding, we need a lot of all these fundamental discoveries, scientific discoveries to fund the innovation, right? So that's really the source of innovation, the basic research, but which is we're being cut right now, a lot of it, and then also the training of talents, like Faye said, and that's extremely important to basically fuel the long-term growth of our sector. So I think from these perspectives, it has been quite negative, in my view.
Okay, thanks. Since we are in the kind of like a very difficult situation now, so what should we do? So in today's market, what are you doing? What specific attributes are you prioritizing when you evaluate the biotech investment opportunity? Faye and Katherine.
Turning to me, or?
Yeah, Katherine, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
For us, nothing really has changed in terms of methodology and philosophy and mission. We're looking for a combination of assets, people, and valuation, right? So assets, we're looking for the transformative medicine, best first in class, that will really bring true differentiation to a particular indication, particular disease management, and people, very, very important, the entrepreneurs that we work with, and also even in the public company space as well, and also valuation. So on the public side, maybe it's a good time to sort of go in and do some investments, and on the private side, we also are relatively sensitive to valuation. So I think our methodology really has not changed. It has always been this kind of a book that we go by.
So you still keep the normal operation and keep investing?
Oh, of course, yeah. We have a lot of cash to deploy, yeah.
So do you see this is actually even more opportunity to invest because the company has a feel to invest more money in the future, so they want to get more money now, the valuation or maybe is an advantage to the investors?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, from that perspective, is a positive, I guess, for the investors. I think, but at the same time, the bigger market is shrinking, right? So just a few more stats. So in the first quarter of this year, the follow-on financing on the public side is down 58%. Pipes down 43%, and on the private side, the venture side is actually pretty flat from last year or from last quarter. So, so I think the private side is deploying pretty consistently.
Consistently.
Yeah, and then I think eventually, as people sort of have a better feel of the market, I think people are going to when they in the cases that people have cash, and then I think people would continue to deploy because it's a good timing.
So that's a positive.
That's the positive side, yes.
Yeah, investors are not scared or not stopped investing. Actually, it's also about the data, about the people, right? Even in the long term, who knows? But we still have to keep going today.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you, Katherine. Faye?
I would agree with Katherine. I think the fundamentals or thesis of our investment does not change. It's never changed. We're looking for assets that address fundamentally kind of the unmet needs. We rank them globally. However, I do think the bar has been raised significantly. I do think I agree with Katherine that I think this could be a good time to invest from the valuation perspective. But from the public market exits perspective, that remains very, very tough. So, we kind of did our internal calculation. We're talking about a 2% chance of deals getting done. That's M&A. And if you look at the public side, XBI, Katherine also mentioned, not only it's down this year, but if you look at kind of the 10-year horizon, it's exactly where it was 10 years ago. So where do these companies go when they go, IPO? So, we're looking at M&A, but M&A, I think half of the deals that were done with public companies last year. So, so if we're investing early stage venture, we almost have to look at kind of new playbooks. We have to think about, kind of new deal structures, whether it's licensing or co-development, hybrid model. So we're thinking more about that in terms of criteria, in addition to assets, people, how we're looking for, I think, number one, is to be complete transparent, a strong insider commitment. If this is not your first round, insiders need to step up in this environment. Number two, partnership possibility. I think more and more companies that are getting funded in this environment, they're in parallel or have already secured, partnership deals with strategics. So that applies to our own portfolio, like Vigo. They have done a partnership deal first before we collect the next round. Same as the company that just won IPO yesterday, Duality. They have done multiple multi-billion-dollar deals with strategics before getting money from either public market or private investors. So I think that's super important in this market. Also, capital efficiency. So more and more so, if we look at data, capital has shifted away from preclinical companies. I think more funds are looking for clinical stage assets. But if you're in the preclinical stage, we want to know if you can get to the next value inflection point in a fairly capital efficient way. So that also, is related to the next point. Is regulatory clarity. Especially given the uncertainties at the FDA, we're cautious currently on, first-in-class drugs that are trying to use novel endpoints or surrogate endpoints for approval. This is, uncertainty on top of uncertainty. So we'd like to just more clarity these days and more partnership, more money. So definitely it's tough.
Hey, thank you so much for the constructive suggestions or the action plan, like how to get the fund for the company. So I would like to go to what do you see the most practical, how the company make the capital more efficiency? You see that's different ways to doing that now compared to before. The company will become more creative.
Is that question for me?
Yeah. Yes.
Obviously for companies who have global presence, or are comfortable with especially operating in China, they have used China as a hub for talent, for enroll in clinical trials faster. But that doesn't apply to all companies. If you're an oncology company with fairly de-risked assets, and then the regulatory pathway is fairly clear, then maybe you could go to China and half of the cost and 3 times as fast. But if you are in, I don't know, for example, metabolic space or chronic kidney space, and then in that part of the region, the standard of care may be different for those patients. So you can't really readily translate data from that part of the region to the US. So definitely cross-border global operation is one, but you just have to, it's really case by case.
Thank you. Thank you for adding that. Actually, Marc and Roland, both companies are the best execute for this strategy. So I would like to invite Marc to share how has your company adopted the fundraising approach in response to the current investment environment?
Yeah, first of all, we raised actually 100 million Australian dollars mid of last year. So that was obviously very timely. In conjunction also with clinical trial collaboration, we have been signing with Merck & Company. So we are for the phase 3 clinical trial in first-line non-small cell lung cancer, we teamed up. It was actually the first time since more than 2.5 years for Merck to enter into such a collaboration. So I believe we do not need to specifically adapt, because one key thing is to really have your budgets under control. We have always been negotiating every single agreement, so we do not need to switch into, let's say, into a crisis modus, because we have always trying to be very careful with the funds the shareholders, investors have been entrusting us with. That's always number one. As a company, you can't control the outcomes of clinical trials. Sometimes it's even difficult to influence the timing of recruitment. Of course, you can try it, but it's at the end of the investigators. But you can negotiate agreements. So the cash outflows, you can do something about. And that's actually the responsibility of biotechs all the time, irrespective if the markets are good or bad. There is no money to waste, and you have to concentrate on your core projects, not do luxury things, and really move the drugs towards the market. That's quite important as well. So in other words, the best answer to a difficult environment is to spend time with your budget, to execute very well, to be open and transparent in terms of the communication. Don't talk things up and then under-deliver. That's never a good idea. And of course, also to the points of the other panelists, try to do a deal. Maybe you can get non-dilutive funding. Maybe there are, and this is something which we actually use at Immutep, maybe you can get grants. We get R&D tax incentives in Australia, 43.5% cashback on the R&D dollar invested. In France, it's 30%, and about the same amount in Germany. So there are also non-dilutive funds, and it's your duty simply to search for that, to execute, and also to discuss with your partners, or to get new partners, and discuss with your vendors. As simple as that. But you should do that all the time, practically.
You already laid out the action plan. Thank you, Marc. Roland.
Yeah, I mean, much has said, and I totally support that. I think in our case, you know, we are in a similar situation as Immutep, and we have raised $60 million beginning of this year with a pure insider round. So echoing Faye's point of, you know, insiders in such situation should step up to the plate and cover much of the deal, which happened in our case to 100%. I think if we would now raise money, I think I would, of course, also first look at my budgets. What can I change to prolong runtime? I think I would also, in times of uncertainty, I think it's even more important that as a company you deliver data, or you're able to show data. Now in clinical trials, it's a bit more difficult, as also Marc said, right? But if you're in preclinical stage, I would maybe revisit our timelines to see, can we maybe speed up certain things? Can we change certain things so that we generate some data earlier than planned, in order to reach out to investors and present them with a data set that is convincing in these times of uncertainty? I think then, you know, showing data is always good, right? But I think even in these times, it's even more important that you show as good data as possible. And then I think one of the other things, and we will talk probably about that later too, is in times of uncertainty, you probably need more investor interactions as well. You know, it's anyway, you know, it takes a lot of effort to create a syndicate of investors, but in these times, I feel you probably need to step up even more and increase your efforts in talking to more investors, because the likelihood that you receive more no's in times of uncertainty is very likely.
I remember you showed me the story. We will keep that later, the case study. How did you leverage the talking to more investor and consistently get the successful fundraising and the partnership done? Thank you, Roland, for your sharing. So I think that's what I heard from all of you, like a partnership, leverage the different regions' advantage. However, in this world now, I grew up in the globalization. I feel it's kind of like an anti-globalization of the government. So what are the challenges and opportunity you see the cross-border biotech investment? Because in the past, actually, China can grow so fast, the biotech, of course, the local talent and local government support, but also the founder support from US, from Europe is contributed. And then US actually also received, and Europe received a lot of fund from China in the past decades. And that's what I see, how we can help each other. However, now we're talking about we need to protect what we have. We don't want to share with others now. So what are you see the challenge and opportunities? So we can go with the Faye.
Okay. Well, you already mentioned, I mean, maybe I'll just skip the obvious and just say that geopolitical risk is real and we're all watching it. But just put that aside, even before this year, there were some really interesting trends emerging out of China, you know, and then which has gone from a booming innovation hub to what feels like a market-wide sale. So, you know, what's leading up to this is, you know, a lot of the data people already know. China contributed to about 30% of the clinical trials globally. And then so that's definitely a lot of innovation. And then I think the innovation train has left. So that's going to keep going. But if you look at least 2024's public markets there, Chinese biotechs raised just over 600 million last year. So just to put that in perspective, that's less than what Zara raised in a single 1 billion Series A round. So, you know, so there is a lot of supply, but the capital market is seriously crunched, leading up to a wave of forced sale signs across the market. So, and, you know, adding to a lot of pharmas are facing this 2028 patent cliff. You know, that's what we noticed last year. 30% of the deals last year were done with Chinese companies, and that trend is continuing. And, you know, we predict that that trend will keep going. And that's going to have fairly, you know, long-term and implications for US biotech. And, you know, what is and I think we don't know how that's going to end up. We don't know how the tariff will end up, but you know, there's, you know, kind of the coming of China biotech at discount with global potential. That's presenting a lot of opportunities and challenges for the industry across the world.
Thank you for sharing. I think China since joined the the global clinical trial, actually ICH. So it's kind of like it's going like very faster to be the part of the global drug development. Yeah, I totally agree. Let's no way we can move that back. And also, why do we need to do that? Because we have a huge the patient there. Like if you go to a Chinese hospital, you will see like a stock, like early days, the stock market is packed with all the people look at the screen to land up to see the doctors. And I think this is actually benefit to the China patients, but also is benefit the global patients because we can speed up the drug development, right? And so, Katherine, where do you see this? Because you also have the office in China, and where do you see this change or challenges and opportunities?
Yeah, I think over the past, let's say 10, 15 years, or 20 years, let's say, the China biotech has evolved from, you know, me too, me better, and then to, I think, we better, because for particular targeters, there could be multiple or a lot of products developed against that. So because we better, because there are tremendous talents in China, you know, very good chemists, very good protein engineers, etc. And then now to innovation. right? So very global level innovation. For example, the PD-1 and VEGF bispecific, etc. So I think it has been really exciting to see this evolution. Unfortunately, the geopolitical situation is not favorable for this. A lot of capital has left or restricted investment into China, etc. So that's very, very unfortunate in my view. And then for us, what we are doing right now is we have renminbi funds, and we continue to invest in China companies. And then we look for assets that have global competitive potential. And then on the US dollar side, we would bring those assets, the ex-China rights, into the US, either form new companies here or bring them into our current portfolio companies, etc. So that's kind of what we're focused on these days.
That is like you invested in China to build there and then take to US and to license the ex-China rights. That's how the big pharma have been doing that in the past few years. As Faye said, 30% pharma get a ex-China rights. They just take a ex-China rights to US, right?
Yeah, it's very interesting. So if you have like good assets, and then the company usually have in front of them a few options. They would have venture capital firms like us at the table. They will have the multinational pharma at the table. They would have other people at the table, right? So and they basically choose the best sort of outcome for them. So we've seen each of these cases play out, and then also, it is a process of weeding out the non-competitive ones. Faye mentioned the bar is higher, and also, there's so many assets there that look kind of similar, right? So how do you sort of differentiate and build competitive edge and build a attractive asset / portfolio? And those are all key issues.
I think now we cannot just look at the individual. We need to look at how to leverage to go through this geography, political tension time. How can we go through that? I think it's a very good strategy about it. So, Marc, how do you see, because your operation, actually you have global operation. So how do you see, do you have any plan for the cross-border investment to attract investor from other regions? And what do you see the opportunity and the challenges there?
So we have already been attracting different investors from different regions, from Asia, of course, from Australia. Most of our institutional investors are actually from Australia, also from the United States or Europe, buying on the market or being part of a financing. So this is already a strategy since years. I mean, we have seen in biotech different crises at different points in time. So it's always good to spread your risk there. But in terms of globalization or anti-globalization, I mean, this is also to be seen, I believe, in historic context. If you look pre-First World War, there was also the forming, for instance, of Made in Germany. It was originally meant as a punishment from the British. And there were protectionist movements since 200 years, give or take. The reality is that over time, it moved forward into more and more globalization. I mean, just think about the Western world, bringing back the whole manufacturing into the countries, into the United States, into Europe. This would mean, of course, that the cost of the therapies and medications would go up, I don't know, by 30, 40, 50% or so. So the reality is that we all depend on the one or the other way on clever global supply chains. You can always, of course, argue and discuss the level and the percentage, but zooming out from the current difficulties, and of course, I don't have any crystal ball, but it wouldn't surprise me if in 10, 20 years, there has been the next step in terms of globalization. So this remains to be seen. Reality is the talks and short-term action is one thing. Another reality is that, of course, innovation, especially medical innovation, is a truly global thing. Look at the most successful drug these days, Keytruda. PD-1 has been discovered in Osaka in Japan, or CTLA-4, LAG-3 have been discovered in France, in Marseille and Paris, actually. So all of this needs to come together. And of course, the US is brilliant in terms of making a business, and also the margins are quite attractive. But overall, with twists and tweaks, and of course, with adaptation and close review and management of your supply chains, something which you should do all the time. We saw and continue to see a war in Russia and Ukraine, where a lot of patients have been recruited in past clinical trials. This is something which you need to factor into your strategic decision making. But again, from a macro point of view, at least I do hope that we are going to continue to see worldwide supply chains.
Marc, you just mentioned, I think, a very interesting, also very important part. Like we have so many regions in the world, and the patients are not treated. Actually, it's just such a unfortunate for the patient and for their local families, but it's also delayed like global drug development because we lost this patient data. So what do you take any action, or do you see any other like effective way to help those regions or like investment?
I mean, if you look at regions in war, Russia and Ukraine, that's of course a difficult one, right? I mean, there's not a lot you can do, but for your own company strategy, of course, when you look at the clinical trial, you need to cater for that. And of course, you should increase your sites, for instance, from start. You need to challenge the feasibility from the CRO. So you need to make sure that you can still execute what you are doing, irrespective in which indication, irrespective of geography. And of course, eventually, you can bring your medications in the different parts of the world, always subject to the relevant regulatory discussions. But this would be true also for Russia in a few years from now, or all other regions.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Roland.
Yeah, just quickly, I mean, of course, echo what has been said. I think in terms of, we as a private biotech company, our supply chain, we maintain it in Central Europe. So drug manufacturing, but also fill and finish, that's in Central Europe. So for us, at least the risk is currently lower. But of course, when it comes to the global trials, we also choose our markets carefully, or our regions, notably first of all the United States, and then followed by some Central European countries. And I think coming out of Switzerland, of course, I mean, I think as almost the rest of the world, right? I mean, globalization is still in place, it has not been shut down. I mean, of course, we see a lot of disruption, especially now between the United States and China. But I mean, out of other countries, things are still working. We have collaborations with Japanese companies. It's working very well, as it did before. At the moment, we don't have any collaboration with a Chinese biotech or pharmaceutical company, although still exploring the market there. So out of our jurisdiction, things keep as normal. But of course, if you're domiciled in the US, I think the story is currently different, and you need to be mindful of the uncertainty that is on the table, and also in terms of capital flow. If you had investors from China, the question is, and nobody knows how far that still escalates, right? Maybe suddenly, I don't know what happens with your Chinese investors on the cap table, whether there is any, from a legal point of view, whether there are certainly any actions, suddenly any actions that would, have an impact on your Chinese investors. So I don't know, but we will see that.
I think so far our conversation are a little bit heavy because of so much uncertainty. And also I really appreciate everyone's honest and openness of this dialogue, actually making me even think deeper what's going on, how can we work together. But next, let's bring some of the positive here. I would like to invite all of you share some of the successful like a fundraising experience, and that's to cheer up this community with what you are so proud of, what you get done last year. I know Roland and Marc, both of you successfully raised the money. Maybe Roland, you can start it. You go, how did you get that done? Because I think that's really reflect what we are talking earlier, like a partnership and leverage the different region.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share. I mean, certainly one thing is partnership. I'd say if we want to start with that, I think it's part of optionality, right? I mean, I think when you, as a private biotech company, especially if you raise money, of course, then you might end up in a risk that you develop dependencies on pure equity financing, which is of course important. But Numab, for instance, at Numab, from the outset of the company, we have very much focused on partnering with the pharmaceutical industry. And we have generated a high amount of money through non-dilutive funding that helped us to de-risk, financially de-risk the development of assets, and also manage our cash flow and not purely depend on equity financing. I think that's something that is really crucial for biotech nowadays, that you decouple yourself from pure equity financing, but really go out and talk to the pharmaceutical companies to understand whether you can land the deal and de-risk your asset development. And I think especially for platform companies, as Numab is also one, that's of course, it's an interesting strategy, because you can offer your platform and develop, provide innovation to pharmaceutical companies. So next, I think to the option, providing the optionality or ensuring the optionality, I think fundraising often starts with doing the homework first, right? I mean, I think it's very important. Of course, we're a scientific community, so when you reach out to investors, your story in terms of finance needs to, your story in terms of science needs to be rock solid. But also, right, something that Marc said before is like your budget. Do you know your cash runway? You shouldn't be surprised suddenly running out of money. Then you should understand, by when do I need to have the cash in? You probably want to have the cash in some months ahead of time before you run out of money. Then, what are the catalysts that you can achieve with your money on the bank? That's important, because you want to show data to the investors. You want to achieve a decent valuation or a fair valuation, right? Data plays an important role. And then, of course, also what is the use of proceeds? You need to show what you're doing with the investor money and what you can achieve with it. And I think then, it's about time. You should allow yourself enough time for building the syndicate. I think when you can start on an existing syndicate, it's certainly different as if you need to create a new one. But make sure you allow yourself enough time for those investor interactions, because hardly anyone invests after the first meeting, right? I mean, some investors might bring in friends or like other funds that they know well, but normally it takes a number of meetings and updates until somebody invests. And then I think last but not least is really creating the momentum. It's like when we've raised funds, for instance, back in 2021, when we raised 100 million, for us it was crucial to talk to obviously investors, but also to banks, analysts, and key opinion leaders. And because this is like the environment or this ecosystem, everybody is talking to everyone. So it's, as a biotech company and somebody that is looking for funds, it's important to create that momentum that people are aware, and you create, I don't know whether fan base is the right word, but you need to create this momentum because it's kind of has a self reinforcing impact, and suddenly people are aware of you without having talked to them. And I think that's something that I believe we did at Numab very well in our fundraise, so that we now allowed enough time, but really took a lot of effort to talk to a large number of investors to make sure people are aware of Numab and what our goals are.
Thank you, Roland, for sharing the success story. Marc.
Yeah, so Roland mapped out a number of very, very important points. I shouldn't repeat them all, but indeed, especially as a publicly listed company, it's very important that you have the right ecosystem so that you have analyst coverage, that you have the banks. That's all very important, that you do not show up only for a capital raise or financing, but that you maintain a good dialogue with a number of different investors, your shareholders, practically over the years. It's always a longer journey. It's a sustainable journey, so that what you said a year ago, that you can look straight into the eyes of that investor and shareholder, and it was a valid statement. And I think that's crucial, and this is something you have to earn over time. And then you need to do the hard work. You need to discuss with a number of different investors. We had, thankfully, a very heavily oversubscribed capital raise, which is not the norm these days, I would say. And we have had also the fortune, to Roland's point, in terms of partnering, that we just have been signing a collaboration agreement with Merck for the phase 3 trial in first-line non-small cell lung cancer, a very broad, very large trial, which we have, by the way, also been discussing with the FDA protocol. So that was quite an important point for us. And then also to have the financial means to entertain that clinical trial has been quite important. So it has been a very good race, a good experience. And it's always coming back to the same principles of all the hard work and the different steps Roland mapped out.
I think there's no secret. Hard work and consistently never give up, right? I think this kind of like the most important human work. We needed to connect with them and to show we are here, we are working.
Yes, and we are not facing a nuclear winter in terms of the equity capital markets. Faye mentioned at the very first statement the numbers, how it has been coming down, and Katherine as well. But money is still available. Quality filter getting tighter, bar is getting higher, but you can get the cash. It has not been completely drying up. And that's an important statement.
It's very interesting you say that, because when we are in the middle, we always heard you might say, oh, so hard to find a good asset. And then a lot of biotech companies say, we cannot find the investors. And so now we turn around the table to investor Faye and Katherine. So what are the common factors have you observed in the biotech companies that have successfully funded? Let's see if they're only different from what Marc and Roland shared. Faye, you want to share first?
I think it's no wonder that Roland and Marc have successfully raised. They have all the common, they already mentioned all the criteria and common characteristics that we mentioned. And then I mentioned earlier, anything about from, how do you manage your capital efficiency? Can you find partnership in the middle? I think what it comes down to is there's just too much uncertainty these days. It's very expensive to develop a drug. It takes over $1 billion, long time to exit. So there's a lot of uncertainty around capital markets, around regulation. So how, as a company, can you minimize that uncertainty and create optionality? I think really that's the key. Creating optionality is around can you find partnerships aside from getting private capital. So, I think almost all the companies that at least we either funded or and closely watched are the companies that have struck partnerships with strategics in parallel with raising funding. And then two is, can they manage their cash very well, very efficiently? Can they get, so, we don't have to worry about, okay, we just funded, we just bridge them for another 6 months, and then they need to be on the road again and raise. So those are the, things that we really want to avoid. Yeah.
Thank you, Katherine.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. I guess, right now I'm just looking at the projects that we are looking at close to investing. They are really very, we think, earlier stage and then differentiated science. I think that's really the key. We're very always excited about the novel science and medicine. I think that's really the driver for us on the venture side. So, and then, if you look at the Q1 deals that got done, that raised over $100 million on the private side. We looked at a couple of them, but we didn't participate. But I think they also are clinical stage already, right? And then they have some kind of proof of concept, so that you can assign a more accurate probability of success onto the program, right? And then they're looking for, I think the investors are kind of looking for maybe a quicker kind of M&A exit. So I think a lot of them have this type of characteristic.
Thank you, Katherine, for sharing. I think because of the time, I think I would love to continue this conversation, go too deep, and we can go around for days. But we have like a limit time, and I also understand everyone is busy. So I would like to conclude this webinar by each of you maybe have the advice or suggestion, for the investor or the hope for the investor, and how can we go through this difficult time together? How about we start with Katherine?
I think cash is king in a downturn. Market goes in cycles. Just inevitably it happens. So use the cash conservatively and most efficiently. I think that's really the key. And look for non-dilutive financing, as everybody has said. And then I think work well with your investors and partners. For us, if we invest in a company, we usually are on the board most of the time, and then we would help just help the company raise money, put the message out, look for partnerships for them, and then we recruit key positions for them. We just really go all out to help our companies. I think, I'm sure Faye does the same thing with her company. So it's really, I think the companies work well with your investors, and then maybe they have resources, just keeping close touch. And then if you have questions, ask as well. I think that's really important. And also, I think what Roland said was really good as well. Just just keep constantly in contact with people, even during the difficult times, because this keeping sort of yourself the awareness up, in investors' minds is also very helpful.
Thank you, Katherine. Faye?
Yeah, I think Katherine mostly covered it all. The biggest challenge for biotech CEO is to raise money, especially in this market. It becomes extra difficult. So definitely create all the optionalities, look for, keep talking with, various sources of funding. And if you're picking a private investor, see, besides capital, if they can help you go as you grow, right? So if you're early stage, you probably don't have the right CMO yet. So do they? And then, even if you have a CMO, have you interacted with the FDA? So look for those partners who can help you bridge that gap when you are going through that growth.
Thank you, Faye. Marc, please.
Yeah, for a biotech company, it's to work very hard to execute practically in all different aspects. But the basic principle, if you are successful with a life-changing medicine, that this will be paying off in every respect. I think this holds true in every market. And you can see also that there are very well-performing biotechs. Yes, fewer, certainly true. But this market is not the end of the world, neither for investors nor for biotechs.
Thanks, Marc. Roland?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, actually. And I feel it's like give and take, right? I mean, Katherine rightfully said, it's, and also Marc, we need to execute well. We need to preserve the investors' money as good as possible, look for alternative fundings. I think also avoiding surprises is very important. That is really the duty of the company towards the investors. I mean, you cannot control the biology to some extent, right, or to a large extent. But I think, you know, there are many things you can control or other things you can control, and you should avoid any surprises for your investors, maintain the dialogue. And I believe if you do that, investors will also stand by the company if it experiences a hard time. I think then you maximize chances. That's why I said, like, it's a give and take. And the more seriously you do your job, the better, you know, or the more likely it is that the investors will support you in tough times.
Thank you. Thank you for all your advice and the suggestion. I think during this difficult time, I really appreciate everyone come out to share their successful case study and also the investors' insight to make more clarity here and help each other to go through this difficult time. I think that cash is king, and the partnership cross the region collaboration. I think at this time it's more important we are working together. Is not just working on our own. Thanks again for your joining me today, and thanks everyone to join us. And we are looking forward to next time. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.